Hello, my name is Daniel Stillwell. I am the editor for the IFTA e-newsletter, and we have with us today Cadmona Hall from Chicago. So thank you, welcome, and thank you for being here at IFTA in Spain. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What kind of clinician do you identify as, and what kind of work do you do?
Well, thanks. Thanks for having me. I appreciate taking the time, and it's only a pleasure to be here in Spain. So I'm so glad. I love IFTA. I teach at Adler University, and I'm a professor there, and I also teach at the Ackerman Institute in New York.
Cool.
You asked what kind of therapist am I?
Yeah.
Well, I think the first and foremost is that I am as a couple and family therapist, I am a die-hard family therapist. I'm all family therapy all the time. You know, the joke I say to my students is that it's tattooed on my face in brown, so you can't quite see it. But I am passionate about family therapy. I guess I'm a socially just family therapist. I think that our dimensions of culture and how they impact the way that we live, how we organize our world, and then how we're impacted by the systems of oppression that are designed to privilege some and marginalize others. I think have a huge impact on how we live. I think it also has a huge impact on the ways we work towards healing. And so although I have some favorite theories that I lean into, no matter what, I'm always thinking about those larger systems.
Yeah, and Adler's a good place to have that.
That's exactly the case. We pride ourselves on our social justice work.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, then that transitions nicely into your presentation that I think you're about to give.
Yes.
All right. So Black women, health and healing.
Yes.
So tell us what you're presenting on and any takeaways.
Yeah, thanks. One of the things I love about IFTA is the fact that there's so many different styles of presentations that you can do, and so this presentation is self as a therapist focused. It was sort of birthed, I think, the same way that the idea in and of itself was sort of birthed in my own life. Talking with another colleague of mine who's also a Black woman, who's also a professor. Really talking about the ways that our intersectional identities impact us as Black women. And in particular in the kind of work that we do, where you need to be of service to other folks, we're constantly giving and recognizing that in the way the United States operates, there are high expectations for Black women to solve problems that we haven't created. And then we're literally in the business of helping families learn how to make changes. And so, one of the questions that we had was, how can we create healing opportunities and healing spaces for Black women? And when we asked that question, how could we ignore ourselves? And so we had to pause and slow down and say, let's take an inventory of our own lives. What are we doing to promote healing and well-being? How are we creating enough space for things like nourishment and rest and rejuvenation? And so what ended up happening, which is so interesting, it wasn't sort of what we thought was going to happen, but one of the things that we did was we started running. And so
like literally going for jogs.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I had joined a running group, and I enjoyed myself. And I think there are a lot of Black folks who like running but don't find it a space that feels welcoming and inviting for you as a Black person.
Right. And
so we started running, and we decided that we would run a race every month, and we did that for 2 years.
Okay.
5Ks, 10Ks, 10-milers, and eventually a couple of half marathons.
There you go.
We had no idea we'd be doing that. I never thought that would be the case. But one of the things about the running process that I think was really helpful was sort of being learners again, having to actually learn sort of the science of running. But then also being in a space where, when you're running 10, 11, 12, 13 miles, you have time to really think and be with yourself. And so, hearing yourself talk in moments when things get rough, what's the kind of conversation that you have with yourself? Do you have the conversation you think you have? And I know that for me, there were definitely days where I'm hitting mile 7 and I'm saying to myself, why am I doing this?
Right.
You don't have to. You can just stop. And so what do you do to sort of move past those moments? Because there's a larger goal. And so it really gave me a chance to investigate my own thinking and really shift to being much more loving, nurturing, and gentle with myself. And that's tough in this world. There's not a lot of places and spaces of safety, of care for Black women, and so we internalize these messages that where we take over responsibility for things that are not ours, that the expectation that we need to show up with strength and show up as resilient all the time, that there's no room for our own vulnerability and our own humanity. And then that's, and we end up reflecting that which is given to us. And so this process was really helpful to continue the unlearning of that. And then in addition to running, we did yoga. And so I did yoga every day for 2 years. Ended up, again, didn't know this would happen, but ended up becoming a certified yoga instructor.
Yeah.
I never said to myself, I want to teach yoga, but you start deepening a practice. And so I feel like running felt like a challenge, right? Like to move across the floor. And it gave me an opportunity I'm like, the ground is not moving. It's all me, right?
Yeah.
And so running really helped channel some of the frustration, some of the rage, right? I mean, how many people were murdered due to state-sanctioned violence, right? We've got laws that are being put in place that are removing critical race theory, that are removing people's rights to have access to appropriate medical and health care, right? I mean, there are just so many, how many school shootings have we had? I mean, there's so much trauma. And so running feels very active, felt like a place to sort of do something with that energy. And rage, which I think is so important. Ken Hardy talks about rage being a response to injustice, not just about being really mad.
Right.
And I think that was really helpful in running. Whereas I think yoga was a centering, a slowing down, a deepening relationship with the breath, an opportunity to practice flexibility of head, heart, and mind. And that felt like, a different side of a healing process. And so that's some of what a long-winded way of sharing some of what the presentation is about.
And the processing of the rage, along with the presumed responsibility, that guilt that often comes with not fulfilling some other person's requirement of how you're supposed to show up in the world. How do you help people work through I'm not good enough, I'm not doing enough, versus I'm doing more than anyone could ever ask me to?
That's a great question. So I think one of the things is to really slow down enough to ask, where did that question even come from?
Right.
When did you decide that someone had this expectation, and let's investigate who is the someone or what is the someone? Because I think most of the time it's these larger systems of oppression that say to people, and particularly to Black women, it's your job to take this on. And I think as a response to trauma, what we've done is become hyper independent. And so often people don't recognize that as a trauma response. Like, no one chooses to be hyper independent, but when you can't depend on anyone else, when the things that you should be able to lean on are consistently stripped from you, the mantra that you learn is, if I don't do it myself, it won't get done. And then we have Black women who are, one of the most educated groups in the United States, top in terms of like entrepreneurs, that there are some of these characteristics that work in this world, particularly work in capitalism, and then you get reinforced for it. And then you don't realize that in this process, you strip away parts of yourself because people are saying, oh, great job. Oh, can't you do more? Can't you do more?
Yeah.
You could get promoted, by the way, if you take on this extra work with no pay. Oh, we love that you know how to problem solve. I think the 1619 Project and the folks in particular who worked on it talked about Black folks as the sort of creators of democracy in this country, which doesn't get talked about enough.
Right.
And it's true, right? But again, we are the creators, but we have not benefited from all the hard work. And again, we're emotionally and physically exhausted, not just in this generation, but due to the work of all the previous generations.
Right.
And so the ways that it's showing up now, I think in particular for Black women, the rates of high rates of depression, high rates of anxiety, but because the symptoms look different, people don't always recognize it as depression, anxiety. And so even coming into therapy, folks are not necessarily treating what needs to be treated, that it isn't the depression or the anxiety, but this larger framing that you have to be all for everyone, that you need to be last, and the expectation that you, by the way, are grateful to put your needs to the side so that everyone else can stand on you. And if you don't show the appropriate gratitude, there's something wrong with you.
Right.
And so we just saw that at the Oscars, right? With Angela Bassett not getting, is that the Oscars? Is that the right word?
Yeah.
Okay.
Academy Awards.
Thank you.
Right.
But with Angela Bassett not getting an award, that, let's be very clear, she deserved and has deserved for years. She's an amazing actress. And so instead of just being like Jamie Lee Curtis won, and fine, it's not like she's a horrible actress, it's fine. But there was all this talk that Angela Bassett wasn't happy enough for her.
Right.
She didn't stand up and boo her. All
Right.
she did was have a blank expression because she was just surprised. There's no room for Black women's humanity. She could have cried in that moment. It would have been appropriate for her to have been just disappointed that she lost, even if she's fine with Jamie Lee Curtis winning. And I think those are just more and more examples of how I think the U.S. in particular, but I think it's a much larger issue, devalues Black women and dehumanizes Black women.
Right. Yeah, I'm hearing themes of double binds. I'm hearing
the need to code switch.
The code switching, the almost sometimes inappropriate use of intersectionality. That people forget that it's about the double oppression, not just the double identity. You know, I also think about how, and we'll wrap up in a second, but I also think about how the shadow side of resilience is built in, because if there was not a system to oppress you, you would not need to be resilient.
Exactly.
So yeah, and obviously, you know, someone of my demographic saying these things probably means something to someone, but it also means less than, you know, I'd like it to be. So we'll end with that, unless there's other parts of your work you'd like to just briefly share.
No, I mean, I don't know. I love teaching. I love supervising, and I love doing therapy.
Okay, yeah. Well, then let's do a fun question to end on. So you're in Chicago, you have work in New York, but you're here in Spain.
Yes.
So where in Europe would you like to spend a week, but you've never been able to?
That's a hard question. Does it have to be in Europe?
No, I mean, sure.
Okay, because I'll be honest with you. I don't think Europe is that welcoming, and I want to go someplace where I get to see people who look like me.
Okay,
so
yeah.
I would love to go to Tanzania. I would love to go to Ghana. One of those two places, and spend a week and just have an opportunity to just be.
Okay.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay.
I appreciate that question.
Thank you so much. And thank you for being here at Cadmona Hall. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.